मैंने लाइव की जो लिंक शेयर की ना वो ग्रुप पे डाल दो। ठीक।
Assalamualaikum everyone. Thank you all for coming. A lot of the people here come on a really short notice, so I really appreciate that. A little bit about just a two-line introduction of myself. I'm Abdullah Sama, and I've done my MBA from this university here in Aligarh, along with my colleague Ibrahim, who's sitting here. I did, like, my specialization was in Islamic finance, and this is the interest that I developed while I was pursuing my bachelor's in industrial chemistry. I felt that science is a bit too bland for me, and I need to pursue something outside of that. So, and I always knew that giving interest and taking interest is something which is prohibited in our religion. So naturally there was a response that we should do something about it. And that is how I discovered the world of Islamic finance and Islamic banking. And then when we were in our MBA, we decided to do something about it. And I do admit कि Islamic finance और Islamic banking का जो scope है वो बहुत वसी है, बहुत बड़ा है, और उसके मुकाबले में हम अभी कुछ भी नहीं कर रहे हैं. Investing is a very, very small subset of the entire society of capitalism, the way this world works at the moment, right? But we thought it's the easiest to start with. At least we thought it was the easiest. Now we are understanding it's not that easy. So anyway, so that is why we started this startup, Deka Invest, and the aim of this presentation is mostly awareness and education. This is not a presentation on how to invest. Kamal Andu sitting here knows way more about investing than me, mashallah. So this is just a little bit about like why do we invest, मतलब अभी की जो investment scenario है उसके पीछे क्या short history रही है of how the world has treated money, how the world has treated finance. So I'll try to wrap this up in 30 to 40 minutes. And then if there are a few questions, so inshallah we can take that. Okay. So these will be the contents just so that you form a picture in your mind. So we'll go over monetary history, then commerce and early Islamic history, capitalism, stock market, investing, and then we will move on to halal business. Right? So, history of money. Now, if you go into the academia of numismatic, which is the study of history of money, so there are a lot of topics which are debated कि exactly जो आज का हमारा modern system है ऐसे का वो कैसे develop हुआ, but certain guidelines, a certain trajectory that most scholars agree on is that this is how it developed, right? So first we had a barter system where people used to exchange one good for the other good, one product for another product, right? That is how the primitive society evolved. And then we went to preferred barter. So दुनिया में माशरे में हजार किस्म की चीजें होती हैं, but there are certain things which have more utility. There are certain things which are more commonly found amongst the masses. So they became preferred barter. So you could say they became a pre-modern form of money. Is my audio clear or is it equal? Okay. So from preferred barter emerged stones and cowries. Okay. जैसे हम हिंदी में कहते हैं ना टूटी कौड़ी भी नहीं है. So cowries actually emerged from this word cowries, which is also known as seashells, which are found on the beach and on the Cornish. So they have a distinctive feature. So they were also used as money for quite a long time. Then came along gold and silver, and then came along paper money with gold standard. Then happened Bretton Woods then fiat. So we'll sort of cover briefly each of these steps. Okay. So what is barter system? It's simply people exchanging one good for another. It requires double coincidence of bonds and cannot lead to much economic development due to low velocity of money. Right. So if I want somebody's wheat, right, and I can offer them barley, but the person who has wheat, he doesn't want barley, right? So because I want what he has, but he doesn't want what I have, so the exchange will not happen. You know, so you need double coincidence of bonds for the transaction to actually take place. So that is why the money doesn't move around. The transactions don't happen so much. So the velocity of transactions, the velocity of exchange of value in economy is slow because of barter system. And that is why it was natural that we evolved to something that is commonly accepted. So how did we reach about there? So then came preferred barter, right? Over time, certain goods became more widely accepted as means of payment, such as cattle and wheat, right? Especially wheat. So wheat is something that the rich will also have, the poor will also have. Some will have it in more quantity, some will have it in lesser quantity, but it is something that everyone needs for their consumption, right? Cattle was also and still is a symbol of wealth, and especially back in the day, if you have cattle, it means you have milk, it means you have cream, it means you have butter, it means you have something to ride on, right? It means you have meat. तो मतलब हर तरह की ज़रूरियत जो है वो कैटल से पूरी हो सकती है, from transportation to food to leather to everything. So certain things became preferred barter, right? And the other example that's mentioned is cowries and stones. Why cowries and stones over wheat and cattle eventually? Because they're easy to carry. You cannot carry cattle in your pocket. You cannot carry wheat in your pocket. Whereas cowries, which are seashells and stones, they are attractive to look at. They're small and you can easily carry. So that is how the transition initially occurred. So cowries already mentioned here. I mentioned rice stones. So Micronesia is a very small island in Southeast Asia, and so rice stone is different from other currencies. So these were huge stones, like 6 foot, 7 foot in size, and because they were so hard to replicate, so they were considered as a store of wealth, right? But it's so huge that you cannot really carry it anywhere. So most of the time, the rice stones would stay in one place, right? But the ownership would be transferred from one person to another through receipts. So it's pretty much like a checking account, right? The money stays in the bank, but through checks, the ownership of that money is transferred, right? So it was something similar to that. So it's something interesting to look at. Then we have birth of metal coins, right? So King of Lydia, which is in modern day Turkey, around that area, in 550 BC. So he's said to have issued the first metal coins. Some resources say it was first originally in China, but these sources, as far as my reading goes, is more credible. So even before China, this area, Lydia, which is in modern day Turkey, is the first one to issue metal coins. And there are obvious reasons why someone would prefer metal coins. So if a king is ruling over a particular land, so he can establish his authority and he can establish his image with a coin that has his name on it, right? Which gives testimony to the fact that this king is the one ruling the land. And then you can also standardize different values. So like we have today, a 100 rupee note, a 500 rupee note. So standardization also became possible because of coins. So then what happened based on these properties, Croesus decided to issue unified certified rate for coins made from electrum. Electrum is basically unrefined ores. The ores के बाद की जो stage होती है before the pure metal is extracted. So electrum contains gold, it contains silver. It's not so pure. It's not in not so pure form. And subsequently, gold and silver being shaped coins known as proselytes. And at the same time, this is very interesting. At the same time, they derive an income from these monetary issues by giving coins a higher face value than the amount of metal used in order to meet these expenses, which is called seigniorage. Right? So if in modern terms, let's say 2000 रुपए का नोट है, तो उस 2000 रुपए के नोट को बनाने में 2000 नहीं लगते, उसको बनाने में हो सकता है 4-5 रुपए ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा लगता है. It's just paper and ink, right? So this is seigniorage. बनाने में 2 रुपए लगे, but the face value is much higher. So this is one of the ways in which the government profits from making money. But if you dive into this further, a lot of seigniorage leads to ruining of economy. Why? Because government को तो free पैसा मिल रहा है कि वो they are the only one on the land who can issue money, so they profit off of this. लेकिन ज़्यादा पैसा issue करो then it leads to inflation, then it leads to hyperinflation and then your economy is ruined, right? And then we have gold standard, right? Gold standard is a monetary system. This is fairly recent, obviously, in which the standard unit of currency is a fixed quantity of gold. Although visible currency was paper, yet it was backed by gold. Okay, the gold standard was first put into operation in United Kingdom in 1821. Prior to this time, silver has been principal world monetary metal, mainly because it's much more abundant than gold. But what is gold standard? Gold standard is not that you're using gold in everyday transactions. It means that the government is issuing new notes, new currency, backed by its gold reserves. Right? So a United States dollar was redeemable in gold. The British pound was redeemable in gold. Right? So the government can only print as much money as much there is reserve. Right? So if the reserve is $100 billion, government cannot print more than that. So that puts a limit on government's authority on government's ability to manipulate the economy. Right? So that was a good thing. But gold standard was suspended during World War I and World War II. Why? Because as is the case in any war, the expenses far exceed what the government can afford to finance the war. So they could not, अगर $10 billion या $100 billion का reserve है और अगर उसे उतनी ही currency print करें, the money to build all the tanks or the missiles, to pay all the soldiers. So they deviated from gold reserve and they went on printing more than what was in the reserve, right? But one more thing, after World War I, the country still came back to the gold standard. But after World War II, the destruction was so high or itni zyada printing ho gayi thi that they could not come back to the gold standard, and that is when the Bretton Woods happened, right? Prepared to rebuild the international economy, 730 delegates from 44 allied nations gathered in Bretton Woods, United States. The Bretton Woods system required countries to guarantee convertibility of their currencies into US dollar to within 1% of fixed parity rates, with the dollar convertible to gold bullion for foreign governments. $1 was exchanged for 0.88 grams of gold. So this is still a form of gold standard. but it is intermediated by the dollar. So all the currencies are not directly exchangeable, are not directly, cannot be directly exchanged by gold. They can be interchangeable by the US dollar, and the dollar itself is backed by gold. So there is now an indirect gold standard, and the world basically depends on the United States to maintain their promise of being pegged to the gold. And obviously, the US did not do that and kept on printing money. And they took gold as security. They took gold as and as guarantee for their loans, and they printed money and gave it out to the foreign nations who wanted reconstruction after World War II. And when countries started to realize that, they came back to US and said, look, here is your dollar. Take your dollar and take back our gold, right? And then a time came where there was still dollar outstanding in foreign countries, but there was not enough gold reserve to redeem that dollar, right? So that is when, in 1971, the President of the United States, Nixon, basically came on live television and said that they are suspending the free convertibility of dollars into gold at fixed rates, and then that is when we have become completely fiat. What fiat means is all the currencies are free floating, and the value of that currency will be purely determined by forces of supply and demand, as is the case in any free market economy, where any commodity, any service, the price of that is determined purely by the forces of supply and demand. And now money, therefore, is also a commodity in the modern economy, whose price related to others is completely determined by the forces of supply and demand. So here we have come from barter to fiat currency. Now I'm just going to touch on one thing which oftentimes gets a bit controversial. So easily मैंने बस इसकी एक slide रखी है. What is the next natural succession? A lot of people say it's Bitcoin, it's decentralized finite money. A lot of people say it's Ethereum, which is a trustless financial operating system, which also has the feature of smart contracts, which basically it's a coded financial system, removing the need for any centralized institutions such as bank. So anyway, I'll just leave this topic right here. So this was just to give you an overview of how money developed over time, right? Commerce in early Islamic history. So Mudaraba, Musharaka. So these are the heart and soul of any Islamic economy. This is Mudaraba. What is Mudaraba? What is Musharaka? When a group of people come together and they say, we want to do business together. I put my capital, you put your sweat. I do this, you do that, and then we share profit at a pre-agreed ratio. जैसे ही होता है, that is मुशारका. And when there is a clear distinction कि एक party सिर्फ capital लगा रही है और दूसरी party सिर्फ मेहनत कर रही है, then that is called मुदारका. So in the case of Prophet ﷺ and Khadija radhiyallahu, this was how their deal was, right? The capital was provided by Khadija radhiyallahu, and the work was done by the Prophet ﷺ, and they had a profit sharing ratio. And if I remember correctly, it was 50-50, 50% on each side, right? The other characteristic of commerce in early Islamic history is prohibition of interest. So obviously interest was not initially prohibited. For a lot of the time during the entire Makkah era, interest was allowed, and the Prophet's uncle Hazrat Abbas was a money lender, and that is how he became quite rich. But later on it was prohibited. So we'll get to that. Prohibition of speculation and gambling. So any activity that does not create value in economy and is purely gambling, purely speculation, that is not allowed. Therefore, casinos, whatever they do is not allowed because it's purely a game of chance, it's a zero something, right? And then introduction of sukuk by MLAs. So we'll get to that as well. Sukuk is just like bond, but it's backed by assets. So I already mentioned this, right? The Prophet entered into a Mudaraba contract with Khadija. Such a practice was common in Arabia, especially among the Quraysh, right? So Quraysh was the trading tribe of Arabia, right? And there's a surah in the Quran that Quraysh was saying, which is basically Ila Quraysh, Ila Quraysh was saying. So this surah is basically mentioning the two caravans of the Quraysh that they used to, go to the upper part of the peninsula towards Palestine, and then during the lower parts in winters during Yemen. So the trade and business is something that is core, that is part of Islamic economy and Islamic society. And this is something that most people, especially in North India, most Muslims, they have a very, sorry to say, a very job-oriented mentality, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I just believe that we should develop more entrepreneurial mindset. I think that leads to higher economic empowerment of communities. So I mentioned this, Hazrat Abbas was a professional money lender who lent on interest. After prohibition of interest, one of the kuffar of Quraysh, he came and said to Hazrat Abbas, your nephew who claims is the prophet, and indeed we believe is the prophet, and has said that, interest is prohibited, and you will make a living on interest. So now what do you say? Are you still a Muslim? Do you still believe in Islam? So he said, if my nephew says that interest is prohibited, then I, Abbas, I am not only saying that I have forgiven all interest, I have also forgiven the principal amount that he said just in support of the Prophet and in support of the Quranic revelation, which prohibits interest. Just to support this revelation. Now another thing, prohibition of interest led to base allowing for agricultural activities. So when the interest was prohibited, the Ansar of Medina came to the Prophet and said, we engage in agriculture. For agriculture के लिए we need to take loans. Because पैसा तो बाद में आता है जब फसल बिक जाती है. उससे पहले हमें फसल उगाने के लिए, irrigation के लिए, उस मजदूरी के लिए भी मनी तो हम कर्ज लेते हैं, और जब हमारी फसल बिक जाती है तब हम उस कर्ज को सूद के साथ, इंटरेस्ट के साथ बढ़ाते हैं. But अब जब सूद हराम हो गया तो how do we deal with this? So Prophet gave the activity, the system of base salam. Base salam क्या है? This is especially for agricultural activities, which says that a farmer can sell his produce before cultivation, before the produce even exists. Produce 10 महीने बाद होगी, अभी तो उसने बीज भी नहीं बोया है, लेकिन वो फिर भी एडवांस में उसको बेच सकता है. तो उससे उसकी फाइनेंसिंग हो गई. Now he can use that money to basically engage in all of his agricultural activities, sow the seeds and do agriculture and everything, and then he can sell those to whomever he had sold on an advance notice. इसका एक फायदा और है. एक दूसरा फायदा इसका क्या है कि हम देखते हैं इंडिया में कितने किसान जो है सुसाइड कर लेते हैं. क्यों? क्योंकि उसकी बहुत सारी वजूहात हैं. एक तो यही वजह है कि वो कर्ज में डूबे रहते हैं, है ना, वो इंटरेस्ट बढ़ता रहता है. तो बेस सलाम जो है कि उस प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व कर रहा है. उनके ऊपर कभी कोई सूद आएगा ही नहीं अगर वो बेस सलाम है. और दूसरी चीज क्या है, बहुत सारे किसानों के साथ प्रॉब्लम ये होती है कि उनकी फसल नहीं बिकती. इतनी लाखों लाख टन फसल जो है वो सड़क के बर्बाद हो जाती है गोदाम में. लेकिन बेस सलाम क्या कह रहा है, अगर आपने एडवांस में बेच ली तो आपको तो इसकी फिक्र नहीं करनी कि मेरी फसल बिकेगी कि नहीं, तो पहले से बिकी हुई है. जैसे ही आपकी फसल हो जाए आप उसकी डिलीवरी करवा लीजिए, पेमेंट हो चुका है. तो ये मतलब हमारी शरीयत की माशाल्लाह खूबसूरती. Sukuk, I just mentioned Sukuk. Sukuk is a certificate that represents ownership in income generating assets. Umayyad dynasty, who came after Khulafa Rashidun, they were the first to issue Sukuk. Then Sukuk, current state and types, I don't want to go into that, it will stretch too much. But जैसे अभी हमारे capital markets में stocks होते हैं और bonds होते हैं, right? So bond, you cannot invest in bonds because they're purely interest-based instruments. So for that we have Sukuk. ठीक है, तो कंपनी बेसिकली इशू सुकूक इश्यूएंस से जो कैपिटल जनरेट होता है, दे बाय एसेट्स व्हिच जनरेट इनकम. वो इनकम फिर जो सुकूक होल्डर्स होती हैं उनको चैनलाइज किया जाता है. जैसे बॉन्ड होल्डर्स को कूपन मिलता है, इंटरेस्ट कूपन, वैसे सुकूक होल्डर्स को जो डिविडेंड मिलता है. इट्स समवॉट सिमिलर टू स्टॉक्स बट नॉट एग्जैक्टली द सेम बिकॉज़ यहाँ वोटिंग राइट्स नहीं होती जो शेयर्स होते हैं. Okay, a brief of capitalism. I'll just try to cover this in 5 minutes. The Dutch, right, they have a huge role in forming the current modern world order. Okay, they are one of the people responsible for bringing about capitalism. I'll mention the nation by Adam Smith. Just go over it. So, in the late 1400s, Belgium becomes the center of international trade. Merchants buy goods anticipating prices will rise in order to meet them in profit. तो यहाँ पे बॉन्ड ट्रेडिंग की अगर होती है because there is a lot of financial activity going on. तो जब when businessman anticipates कि business अच्छा जाएगा तभी वो लोन लेता है, right? Otherwise bond market also drops, right? These are the kind of activities that started happening in the Dutch area, and then they revolted against the Holy Roman Empire, partially defeating feudalism and further paving way for proliferation of free markets, right? Because free markets is pretty much the opposite of feudal systems, which was maintained by the church. Then East India Company, Dutch East India Company became the first company to be traded on the stock market in 1611. So you could say the stock market is 410 years old at this point, right? Seated to the Wealth of Nations, I just once started mentioning this book and this person, Adam Smith, because he is referred to as the father of capitalism because of his academic contribution to this field. And his book, Wealth of Nations, is considered the classic for people to study capitalism. His assumption was that humans were self-serving by nature, but as long as every individual were to seek the fulfillment of their own self-interest, the material need of the whole society would be met. So if everyone is acting in their own interest, it would somehow be such that the society is functioning perfectly. Right? अगर मैं bread बेच रहा हूँ और मुझे उससे profit कमाना है, I would like to make the best bread possible, ताकि I can ask the best price for that bread. You know, something like that. And he called this process invisible hand. So हर कोई सबसे अच्छा काम करना चाहेगा, क्योंकि उसी में उसका economic rewarding उसकी उस हिसाब से होगी. This is just a brief history of the stock market. It's actually 1611, sorry, I need to clarify that. So 1611 में Dutch East India Company, then Philadelphia Stock Exchange was formed in the United States. United States में जो stock market है तो second है नहीं है, first नहीं है, right? Then a small group of merchants made the Buttonwood Tree Agreement. The men met daily to buy sell stocks and bonds in the late 1700s, and this is what is New York Stock Exchange today. You know, so US में दो main stock markets हैं, Nasdaq and New York Stock Exchange. So this is how New York Stock Exchange was born. Then we had the first index at 1896, the Dow Jones Industrial Average. This was 12 companies. This is just an index to track companies, right? Then 1923 the early version of S&P 500 is created, which is basically the top stocks by market cap. It's just an index like the Dow Jones. Then the stock market crashes after decade-long roaring 20s. और ये जो crash हुआ था, this has its own story. मतलब एक stock market मिलने के बाद इतना ज़्यादा stock crash किया था. Then people lost faith in capitalism, and that is what led to the rise of Hitler in Germany. That's a completely different tangent. Anyway, Standard & Poor's was founded in 1941. So that's again just a credit rating agency. I'm just going to skip this because I have something to cover. 2008 global financial crisis was, I think a lot of people in this room will remember 2008 financial crisis because it affected almost everybody in the financial market. And then these are the two crashes which I just mentioned, and we are going through one of the crashes right now. Anyway, so basics of investing. What is halal investing? Most scholars have deemed investing in the stock market to be permissible despite certain compromises with Sharia for the following reasons. The stock market for the most part serves as the only liquid pool of assets where an average person can invest his savings with a small ticket size. Otherwise, if you want to buy land, if you want to buy jewelry, if you want to buy real estate, then you cannot buy that with 500 rupees. You cannot buy that with 5,000 rupees, right? That's a big ticket size. And also liquidity. You can buy stocks today, sell it after 5 minutes, sell it tomorrow, sell it day after tomorrow. You cannot do that in real estate. There's the issue of liquidity, right? And if you try to sell something on an urgent basis, then you will not get a good price for it, right? So this problem does not exist in the stock market. And another point, if you don't directly invest in stocks, but have an insurance or a retirement fund, PPF, then you are in fact invested in the stock market. आपका पैसा कहीं ना कहीं से वो stock market में लगा हुआ है. Investing in businesses is halal in Sharia as long as the business does not engage in activity that violates Islamic law. Therefore, Islamic finance scholars have set up certain criteria to act as a filter differentiating permissible investment opportunities. Okay, so I'll just cover this very briefly. What are the filters? There are two filters. First, business permissibility. The business itself should be permissible. The second is financial ratios. So there are certain ratios की interest income to total revenue इतना होना चाहिए, debt to total assets इतना होना चाहिए, liquid to total assets, liquidity like cash to total assets इतना होना चाहिए, which basically determines whether the stock is halal or not. Ideally, both should be all the impermissible income should be zero, but they never are because of maslaha, because just creating some tolerance so that we can participate in the markets. Different Sharia boards have different screening criteria. So the Sharia board, which is in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia, उनका screening criteria अलग है. In India we have TASIS, which is based in Mumbai, which is also whom we also follow. तो उनका थोड़ा सा different है. And then there is AOP, Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions, based in Bahrain, which is the largest body of Islamic finance scholars in the world. और वो जितने भी Islamic financial activities है, whether it's investing or banking or sukuk, so they issue standards and guidelines for all of that. So Saudi हो गया, India हो गया, directly or indirectly affected by AOP only. And these are different indices based on different Sharia boards of different countries. Again, what about the mutual funds? So mutual fund, अगर कोई बंदा individually stock में invest नहीं कर सकता, so mutual fund is the most easy way to go, and that is basically how most of the people in the world are invested in the stock market. They just invest in a mutual fund. It's a pool of it's a pool of money which is professionally managed by a team of equity analysts, fund managers. It allows for a small amount of money to be diversified across a wide range of assets, achieving lower volatility and better risk management. Right? Different mutual funds have different investing styles and themes. Index fund भी समझ लीजिए एक तरह के mutual fund है, या फिर कह सकते हैं mutual fund एक तरह के index fund है. Index funds are simply type of fund where money is passively invested in a passive index, usually the top 50 or top 100, top 500 companies by market cap in a particular stock market. There are global indices as well, जो globally diversify करते हैं. And then there are certain indices which themes follow by. Halal investing options in India, well, there are these three ethical fund or ethical fund, ETF. We have absolutely no relationship with these people, but I'm just mentioning for the sake of knowledge. But the annualized return for the last 10 years has been as follows: 15.6%, 14.4%, 13.9%. Right? Personal investing. So this is something I'm really interested in. So you could see that I've made some calculations over there. So let's say you start with only 10,000 rupees, right? And you invest 10,000 rupees every month, right? This is something an average person can do. He would 10,000 रुपए हर महीने invest कर सकता है, and he gets an average rate of return of only 15%, which is the index return, or sometimes even below index return, right? And he just keeps doing this for 20 years, right? He keeps doing this for 20 years. So the total principal he would have invested is 24 lakhs. But his portfolio size would be 1 crore and 24 lakhs, right? So you would see the breakdown over here. So this is just how compounding works. This is if someone has a long-term vision, and alhamdulillah, I'm among the young population over here. So we can easily invest 20, 30 years down the line. Keep investing 20, 30 years down the line. So if you just invest 10,000, so 24 lakhs becomes 1.3 crores. So this is the beauty of investing. Jeff Bezos, who was the richest man in the world currently, the second richest after Elon Musk, he once asked Warren Buffett, who's I think the fifth richest man in the world, if you are so good at investing, why don't people just follow you? Right? Why don't people just follow you? So Warren Buffett said, no one wants to get rich slow. No one wants to get rich slow. Right? So you could say belong to, at least from my studies, belong to a cult of value investors like Warren Buffett, and I read those literature extensively. So, value investors believe that if you are able to attain just a decent return, 15%, 20%, 22% every year, but if you can do that every year for a long period of time, then this is the kind of magic that happens. Right? Now, how is Islamic banking connected to investing? Right? Conventional banks invest in government-led issues and other fixed income securities. Right? Their investment in equities is limited because of risk management due to price fluctuation. Islamic bank treasuries invest mostly in sukuk, which are asset-backed, and Sharia-compliant fixed income securities, which is also another form of sukuk. And that sukuk is based on ijara, which is leasing agreement. While Islamic Bank's main operation invests in a variety of businesses, since it cannot give out a loan to begin with, every activity of an Islamic bank deals with the outflow of cash that has something or the other to do with investments. So I forgot to mention here, that Islamic treasury, although I would say majority of their portion is in Sukuk, but a good chunk of it is in Sharia compliant stocks. And जो फाइनेंसिंग होती है वो दो ही तरीके से तीन तरीके से हो सकती है, या इक्विटी बेस्ड होगी या डेट बेस्ड होगी या लीजिंग होगी, राइट? तो डेट बेस्ड क्योंकि इस्लामिक बैंक्स कर नहीं सकते, तो या लीजिंग करते हैं which is ज़्यादा, या फिर इक्विटी बैक करते हैं। तो इक्विटी बैक या डायरेक्टली करेंगे which will become मुदारबा और मुशारका, या फिर थ्रू द कैपिटल मार्केट्स करेंगे which is the stock market, right? Importance of halal investing. Simplest way of long-term wealth creation can be done by anyone. The wealth amassed is significant, can lead to societal upliftment on an institutional level. How I give you an example. Our universities need to have endowment funds invested in the stock market. Now, a very important example. Yale University started a fund in 1718, right, 300 years ago, from an initial fund of only $600, which has grown to $40 billion in value over the 300 years. तो उनका जो फंड है उसमें से जो प्रॉफिट होता है उसका सिर्फ थोड़ा सा हिस्सा is sufficient to maintain the entire university, is sufficient to जितने भी बच्चे गेल यूनिवर्सिटी में स्कॉलरशिप्स में आते हैं इसी फंड से उनको पैसा मिलता है। और मतलब I mean $40 billion is a huge amount of money, right? If the stock market on average, US stock market gives 9.9%, so even if they invest back most of the money and take out just a small amount, it is more than enough to maintain the entire university and provide scholarship for students. Imagine if Aligarh Muslim University, if AMU, Jamia, and other Muslim colleges also took this step, then we could be much more independent from the government, which clearly does not work in our interest, right? Similarly, we could have an investment fund based on cash bust model, where we take out a percentage of profits each year and contribute towards community building activities, such as providing meals, paying medical bills of the poor, establishing schools and hospitals. So this is something that we can take to our advantage, right, on a society level. A little bit about ourselves. Ethica Invest offers free Sharia screening info for all stocks on National Stock Exchange, Bombay Stock Exchange. You can look at our website, ethicainvest.in or ethica.app. Both the websites are available. Ethica aims to become India's de facto platform for halal investments in Islamic financial services. We also aim to become an investment education and awareness platform. Right? We are working on building a platform. This is just a sneak peek. We want to make investments really easy. So we are building a platform which will allow people to directly invest and get their portfolio diversified, rebalanced, and achieve professional fund management services in a scalable manner. So this is how it will work, inshallah, once we launch. So we're working on this product. So yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you for listening and your open questions. If there are any questions, we will. Or if there's anything else that anyone would like to add.
I have a question. Right now, do you think that any country would follow the Sharia law or Islamic finance? Any country? Can you name it?
In terms of halal investing, yeah,
as a country.
As a country. So, in Middle East, there are Islamic banks which are operating on Islamic financial principles, and if I remember correctly, then 25% of Qatar's economy operates through Islamic banks. 25%. That is a significant amount. And I think it's more than 50% for countries like Malaysia. I think it's more than 30% for countries like Indonesia. We have Islamic banks in UK, the Iran Bank, right? We have Sharia compliant home financing in Canada. So we have Sharia compliant mutual funds in India, Tata Ethical Fund, Taurus Ethical Fund, because I think it's a close audience, I can mention that Pakistan has one of the best Islamic banking systems in the world. And their Supreme Court recently ruled that by 2030, all banks are supposed to be Sharia compliant. I'm not very hopeful in that regard, but let's see what happens. So we have Sharia compliance and Islamic finance growing recently, just 10 days back. Australia opened its first Islamic bank. So I think this is a field which is
It's in button. Do you think that the India government will allow the Islamic bank to do?
I think as far as halal investing is concerned, that is something we can do.
Halal investing is the individual factor. Anybody
And mutual funds are also working on that. But
with the subset of the mutual fund.
yes. As far as Islamic banking is concerned,
Under the RBI.
yes. So I think in around 2015, Raghuram Rajan, who was the governor of RBI, he proposed that Islamic banking should be legalized in India. But then the government changed and all of those things happened. But I think we should at least have it in our consciousness that this is something we need and we should work towards it, we should campaign for it. There is an Islamic Credit Cooperative Society in Kerala, right, which is actually supported by the government over there. There is Takwa Credit Cooperative Society, believe it or not, in Karnataka, which was established, I think, 5-6 years ago. So they offer, under the Credit Cooperative Society model, which comes under the state government, they are offering a lot of Sharia compliant banking activities. So you can have a bank account with them, and they invest according to the Islamic banking procedure. So it was established long back, but they are operating. So I think it's मतलब इसमें किसी का नुकसान नहीं है. In fact, a lot of the proponents of Islamic banking say that if India legalizes Islamic banking, it's good for the people in the government because so much of the funds of the Middle East does not come to India because it's not Sharia compliant. If it does, तो वो यहाँ आएगा, यहाँ के businesses में आएगा, तो उससे उन्हीं को ज़्यादा फायदा होगा. So this is something in the economic interest of this country, and जैसे कहते हैं कि ultimately money talks. So I think if we can make a rational argument with the right stakeholders involved, so we can hopefully do
No,
something.
not only Maharashtra, they don't prefer to go to NBFC. I know some of my friends, they say, no, we don't want to go to the NBFC. They go to the bank, but they don't go to the bank.
Yes. So that, we should have a bank, but we should, we should lobby for it. That's what I would say. In Malaysia, Malaysia में जो Islamic banks हैं, half of the customers, Malaysia में conventional banks नहीं हैं और Islamic banks नहीं हैं. Islamic banks के almost half of the customers are non-Muslim because they like the services over there, right? So this is something that does make sense. And I would add one more thing to it. It's not about who's in the majority and who's in the minority. It's about who controls the money. They are the one who actually rule the country. Jews are a minority in the United States of America. They rule the country indirectly. पूरा financial system उनके हाथ में है, right? In India, the wealthiest minority is the Jain community, and they're very influential in their own ways, right? And I say Muslims are not even a minority. We are 20%. Sikh is 1%, Jains are 1-2%. वो अगर अपने मुद्दों के लिए country हिला देते हैं, we are not a minority. We are just a secondary majority. That's the perspective I would like to give. And we have the intellectual capacity to really make things work. और आप अगर देखें इस्लाम जो फैला है साउथ ईस्ट एशिया में, वो तिजारत से फैला है, राइट? और सहाबा ने भी इस्लाम फैलाया, वो एक तरीके से कह सकते हैं तिजारत से फैलाया. So if we are really smart in our business acumen, and it doesn't just have to be an Islamic bank, it has to be any business that we do, anything that we do. If we're really smart about it, then we can make it work in our favor. तो ये बहुत वसी टॉपिक है इसमें. जी सर प्लीज.
कौन बोल रहे हैं?
جی پلیز پلیز آپ یہاں
آپ کی تصویر ہے.
مجھے اس موضوع کے بارے میں معلوم جب ہوا بڑی خوشی ہوئی اور چاہا کہ اسے اٹینڈ کروں. اور اس کے ساتھ ساتھ ایک دوسرا ایکشن یہ بھی تھا کہ اس دوسرے اکیڈمی وہ قریب ہوتے ہوئے میں نے ابھی تک دیکھا نہیں تھا. میں نے کہا ایک مناسبت سے جو ہے اس کی زیارت ہو جائے گی. منظر میں آیا اور الرحمان صاحب کے شہزادے نے کافی ہم لوگ کو دوست کو بلایا اور بڑی خوشی. اور یہ تو معلومات کا خزانہ ہے اور تعجب ہے کہ بیشتر لوگ اس میں واقع فائدہ ہے اس کو چاہتے ہوں گے. لیکن خدا میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ اس لوگوں کو بھی سیکھی ہونی چاہیے. جہاں تک کہ اس کا تعلق بگاڑ دوں. میں نے ایک معمولی ڈپارٹمنٹ میں 13 سال پڑھایا ہے. اس کے بعد 30 سال تک یونیورسٹی جدہ میں اسلامک معمولی ریسرچ سینٹر میں رہا ہوں. اور یہ ابھی جدید کیا یہ ڈپارٹمنٹ میں ایک وائبہ لینے بھی میں گیا تھا اسلامک فائنانس میں. اس میں جو ہمارے ایمریٹس ڈاکٹر محمد نجات وغیرہ استاد اور میرے سپروائزر بھی. مجھے اس پروگرام سے بہت خوشی ہوئی اور میں اس کی کوشش کروں گا کہ اس کے زیادہ اس طرح کے پروگرام ہو. اور ضرور اس بات کی کہ ہمارے ینگ جو زیادہ سے زیادہ میرا افزائی نہیں ہے. پھر بھی میں باتیں کروں گا تاکہ اس سے ہمارے گروپ کے سبق میں آئندہ کے کنیکشن. تو جو میری بات یہ ہے کہ جو ڈیولپمنٹ آف منی ہے اس کا کوئی بہت بڑا تعلق نہیں تھا. تو سب جانتے ہیں کہ آپ آدھا گھنٹہ تقریباً اس کے ساتھ ایک تو پیسے وغیرہ پہ یعنی بتاتے خود ایک پورا لیکچر رکھا جاتا ہے کہ ایک اس میں آپ ڈیولپمنٹ یعنی کہ ریسرچ کیسے کیسے ڈیولپ کیا ہوگا اس کو بتا سکوں کہ کرپٹو کرنسی ایک عام ہوتی ہے پتا نہیں پروگرام اس پر کوئی ایک پورا لیکچر ہونا چاہیے کس طرح کام کرتا ہے. اس میں جو ہے وہ کر رہے ہیں تو یہ کام چاہیے. اس میں آپ جان کرتے ہیں ہمارے دیش میں کوئی زیادہ اس کا تعلق نہیں کرتے ہیں. ہم سب جانتے ہیں کیا جو آج کل ہے اسی ساری جاننے کے لیے اس میں اکیڈمک ضرورت ہے. لیکن جو کرنا چاہتے ہیں ہاں اگر جب آپ مانیٹری ہسٹری پر آپ کچھ کرتے ہیں تو یہ بات ضرور مینشن کرنی چاہیے کہ اسلام نے اس کا کیا موقف ہے. رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کے زمانے میں 2 کرنسیاں تھیں ڈومینیٹنگ. ایک تو رومن دینار اور ایرانین درہم, ایک سونے کا اور چاندی کا. تو رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم نے اپنا کچھ کوئی نیا کوئی کرنسی نہیں جاری اسی سے لین دین ہوتا رہا. تو یہ تو منع کیا ہے کہ سکھوں کو تھوڑا بات کیا ہے لیکن یہ کہ اسلام میں کوئی نئی کرنسی ایجاد کرنے کے لیے انسٹرکشن نہیں ملا. تو بہت سے لوگ جو یہ کہتے ہیں کہ گولڈ اسٹینڈرڈ کا واپس جانا چاہیے. اسلام میں گولڈ ہی جو ہے کرنسی ہے اس طرح کے پیسے ملتے ہیں. لیکن میرا خیال ہے کہ اس میں یہ چیز اوپر رکھی گئی ہے. اور یہ جو ڈیولپمنٹ ہو رہا ہے جیسے آپ نے دیکھا کہ کمیونٹی منی پھر اس کے بعد میٹرک منی پھر پیپر منی اور پھر اس کے بعد چیکس کے بعد آج کل الیکٹرانک منی یہ ہمارے پاس نہیں ہوتا. یہ ایک اکاؤنٹنگ سسٹم ہے. کارڈ ڈالا پلاسٹک منی اور لین دین ہو گیا. کیونکہ منی کا اصل فنکشن یہی ہے کہ فیسلٹیٹ ایکسچینج آف گڈس اینڈ سروسز. اس کے ذریعے ہم یہ فروغ کرتے ہیں. اب آج کل ہمارے پاس مل بھی نہیں ہوتا. کبھی جب تو آپ ذرا خانا کہتے ہیں اگر کا بہت ملتی تو وہ آپ یعنی پیسہ آپ کا ٹرانسفر ہو جائے گا. تو ये सब डेवलपमेंट ऐसे हैं, आप इसको मेरा ख्याल है इसको इख्तलाफ रहा हो सकता है, लेकिन उसका हिस्ट्री को आप पीछे नहीं ले सकते। बस देखते थे जिसकी इजाज़त ये है कि आप ऐसा कर सकते। इस तो इस्लाम में जो वक़्फ़ है उसका बयान करना चाहिए। साथ साथ जो आपने कुछ इन्वेस्टमेंट के तरीके बताए हैं, प्रसार का मुदारबा मुराबा, ये सब चीज़ें इस्लाम की ईजाद नहीं है। ये सब इस्लाम ने ईजाद नहीं किया, ये सब पहले से होते आया है। इस्लाम ने उनको मेंटेन किया और जो अल्साफ के तरीके थे उसको मेंटेन रखा। जो जिनके अंदर किसी तरीके का गलत धोखा नहीं, इंटरेस्ट, ये सब चीज़ें उनको उसमें खत्म कर दिया। तो ये याद रखना चाहिए कि जो है वो ये इस्लाम अच्छी चीज़ों को मेंटेन करता था, अच्छी चीज़ों ये मुशारका मुदारबा ये सब इस्लाम की ईजाद नहीं है, ये पहले से होते आ रहा है। जो प्रैक्टिस किया जैसा बताया कि सरिया का पूरा कैपिटल वो मुनाफा उससे था वो से पहले इस उनके कैपिटल ले गए तैयारी की, तो वो उस वक्त पूरा भाव बचा था, वो वेस्ट होता था। इसमें एक का पैसा और दूसरे की मेहनत। और इस तरह सदूक का जिक्र किया कि अवैया दौर से सदूक का, तो हिस्ट्री में और बता सकते हैं कि गवर्नमेंट आज के सदूक और सदूक बहुत सारा बस इसी में आया कि सदूक है क्या। एक डॉक्यूमेंट होती है कि ये बेसिकली कि ये मैंने तुम्हारा किया देगा उसको पहले एक ज़माने में कुछ सदूक का जिक्र आया कि वो बढ़ता था, यानी हुकूमत की तरफ जो रोजीना या अनाज या जो भी चीज़ें बढ़ती थी तो उसका उन्होंने वो ले लिया कि जब मिलेगा तो मैं आपको दे दूँगा। इस तरीके से उस सूट में आज तक के सूटों में बहुत फर्क है। तो बेहतर होगा कि एक एक चीज़ पर ये लेक्चर मुनक़िद करें कि सूट है क्या नहीं, लेकिन सूट का तो यानी गवर्नमेंट लेवल पर काफ़ी अपनाया जा रहा है, काफ़ी इसका इस्तेमाल होता है। एक एक मौजूद इस बात का मुस्तफ़ी है कि उस पर गहर लेक्चर रखते हैं और वो बात करके बताएँ। आपने जो पूछा कि हिंदुस्तान में इस्लामिक बैंकिंग की इम्कान क्या है, असल में इसमें जो है RBI का रूल रुकावट है। अकॉर्डिंग टू RBI रूल नो वन कैन टेक डिपॉजिट रिटर्न विदाउट इंटरेस्ट। तो अकॉर्डिंग टू RBI रूल आपको इंटरेस्ट लेना ही है और डिपॉजिट दिया तो देना ही है। तो रूल है कि आपको एक्सेप्शन कोई हासिल हो किसी और नाम से किसी तरीके से, तो वो कोशिश में बड़ी कोशिश की और थोड़े थोड़े ये इम्कान और ये उम्मीदें पैदा होने लगी थी कि शायद हिंदुस्तान में भी कुछ इस तरह के बताया जाए, क्योंकि बहुत से मुल्कों पर जो इस्लामी नहीं है जैसे ब्रिटेन वगैरह में, हालांकि हम जो बैंकिंग रूल फॉलो करते हैं वो ब्रिटेन का दिया हुआ है, फिर वहाँ पर भी इस्लामिक बैंक है हिंदुस्तान में, लेकिन हिंदुस्तान में उसकी याद नहीं है। तो ये है हमारा कुछ ऐसा बातों में जो है कि मौजूद बातें जो है वो बेहतर होगा कि हलाल इन्वेस्टमेंट में लोग गाइड करें और फिर उसी पर कंसंट्रेट करें, ज़्यादा तफसीलात में जाने। क्योंकि लोग जानना चाहते हैं कि हमारे लोग पैसे हैं, हम कहाँ लगाएँ, कैसे लगाएँ, क्या नुकसान आते हैं, क्या बनाते हैं, हलाल तरीका क्या है, हलाल स्क्रीन क्या है, और जो हराम है या नाजायज़ इनकम उसके अंदर शामिल हो जाती है तो उसको कैसे साफ करें, कैसे उसको निकालें, ये सब चीज़ें ऐसे मौजूद है जिन पर लोगों को एजुकेट करने की जरूरत है। और बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपका रहेगा।
Thank you so much for the elaboration that you provided, mashallah. So I think we can wrap this up. So alhamdulillah, this was the first time ऐसे तो हम लोग ऑनलाइन बहुत सारे वेबिनार्स कंडक्ट करवाते रहते थे, लेकिन उसमें वो फील नहीं आती है जो फिजिकली करवाई। तो थैंक यू सो मच फॉर कमिंग एंड इंशाल्लाह वी विल कीप डूइंग दिस ऑन अ रेगुलर बेसिस اور جیسی سر نے کہا کہ we need to have more focused topic, ایک ٹاپک کو اٹھا کے اس پہ تفصیل بیان کرنا بہت زیادہ بہتر ہے. تو ان شاء اللہ اس طریقے سے ہم جیسے کیا جائے گا. تھینک یو سو مچ.
Try to mention that's your part, that's how to do the Islamic investment, and then call to the expert for that. Suppose you want to do, most of the people in India are more interested how to do the Islamic investment. That should be your focus.
I'll just give a plug right now. Inshallah, اس پہ آئینہ سے بات کریں گے. So we do offer wealth management service at Ethica Invest, and we have partnered with AZ Capitals in Hyderabad who are SEBI registered, and inshallah we are waiting for our own SEBI registration. So for portfolios upwards of 10 lakh rupees, we offer Sharia compliant investment advisory, and right now we are handling around 40 portfolios. So inshallah we'll discuss this more on our. Thank you so much.
یہ آپ کو موجود آتے
چلو یہ بند کر دے گا پتی. ہمیں خود نہیں پتا تھا کہ ہماری برتھ ڈے جب یہ میٹنگ سیٹ کی تو
گفٹ وفٹ لے کے آتے
ارے نہیں
بڑھتے ہیں